webinar, we will delve into experiences of being both South Asian and British too. Being brown and British myself, I've often found myself feeling either too British when visiting our motherland, and perhaps not British enough when at home here in the UK. So, what does it mean to be brown and British? And how does this duality shape our identities in our unique ways? Um, Allow me to introduce myself for those that don't know me. So my name is Meenakshi Mystery and my pronouns are she, her. I am the founder and CEO of Equality Leaders, a boutique consultancy that partners with organizations to embed diversity, equity and inclusion into their core culture. Additionally, I am proud British Indian woman, the daughter of first generation Indian immigrants. And so today I am joined by 5 South Asian friends who will be in conversation with me for the next 60 minutes. So welcome to our stage, our panelists. Oh, I'm loving this vibe. Look at the colors. Amazing. Welcome, everyone. How are you?
Great.
Yeah, very well. Thank you.
Good. Well, I've done a quick intro to myself. Should we do a quick round robin and perhaps you could introduce yourself, your name, and actually what brings you to this webinar? Why was it important for you to participate in this webinar? I've got Debraj on my top right-hand side of my screen. So Debraj, would you like to go first?
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Nakshi. Hi, everyone. My name is Debraj Datta. I am the Director of Leadership Development at Novanta. My pronouns are he, they. And my reason for speaking at this event today is to foster inclusion for us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Debraj. Shall we pass the baton on to Anchal?
Perfect. Thank you, Meenakshi. Hello, everyone. I'm Anchal Grover. My pronouns are she and her. I work as an executive coach, leadership facilitator, and a speaker, and have over 16 years of experience working in different global HR roles across organizations. My reason for being here is to share my journey of being brown and British. I think every brown and British person has a unique journey, so it's a great platform. And with the hope that, even one person listening to it, if they can benefit from anything that I share, that will be a big plus, and also to learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Anchal. Shaheen?
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to wherever you are dialing in from. Shaheen Akram, pronoun she, her. I am currently working with the Kerry Group as their Global Director of Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging. I have spent more than 20 years in the diversity and inclusion space. We've called it slightly different things, but essentially we're trying to all work towards the same ultimate aim. I've worked across industry, regions, globally, regionally, locally, and done a lot of work in this space. I'm really privileged to be here today because honestly, in the last 20 plus years, I don't remember being asked to be talking about being brown and being British. So I thought it was a really wonderful opportunity that I wasn't going to pass by. And also I think as being a Muslim, Pakistani, born and brought up in the UK, I think I'd like to reach out to some people like myself and others and share some learnings together. Looking forward to today.
Thank you, Shaheen, and thank you for bringing your unique voice to our table. Fahim.
Hi everyone, lovely to be on this call with you. So my name is Fahim Khan. I'm the founder and CEO of a youth empowerment organization called Future Leaders UK. So we work with young people, particularly 16 to 18-year-olds from disadvantaged and underrepresented backgrounds, helping them secure ambitious post-18 pathways, but also make a positive contribution to their local community. And a lot of our work is based around being proud of who you are, that diversity is your superpower, and really helping young people find their their strength from what can often feel like a barrier when we're young and just trying to fit in. I've also been a teacher for 18 years, currently deputy head teacher at a school in East London. So very much know the journey and challenges young people face, particularly from minority backgrounds like South Asian, when they're looking to integrate and trying to fit in. And like my fellow panelists, I think the power of storytelling is so important, and that's what I ask our guest speakers on Future Leaders to do, to inspire the young people, like Meenakshi has very kindly done. And so I think this is something that we all have in our gift to give, is to tell our story, particularly the difficult parts that we don't often talk about, because there'll be somebody listening that will be empowered by that. And if we all can pay that forward, I think when we can see people who have been on similar journeys, it makes us feel a lot more confident. So that's why I wanted to be on today's panel.
Thank you, Fahim. And congratulations for all the great work that you do at the grassroots level. It's just absolutely amazing. And my good friend Ravina.
Thanks, Meenakshi. Hi, everybody. My name is Ravina Dadwal. My pronouns are she, her. You'll have to excuse me. I've got a little bit of a cold, and I think I might be sounding a bit bunged up, so you'll just have to forgive that. But I work at KPMG as an Inclusion, Diversity and Equity Manager. And the reason that panels like this are so important to me, and the reason that I jumped at the chance to be involved, is not dissimilar to what my fellow panelists have said. So for me, I think that visibility is so key. And I always say you can't be what you can't see. I mean, I definitely stole that phrase from someone. It's not mine. I can't take credit. But I think it's that visibility of seeing people who look like you and may have similar experiences as you, being able to have a platform to share. I think that's incredibly important. So having an opportunity to do that, and hopefully potentially be a bit of a role model for other people in the future. So yeah, that's why I was so excited to be a part of this.
Thank you, Ravina. So let's dive in. And I think the first question that I've got in mind is, what does it mean to you all to be brown and British? And Anshel, I'm going to come to you first, if that is okay, not to put you on the spot, but as an immigrant from India coming to the UK, you've experienced significant paradigm shifts in navigating the job market, often working twice as hard to fit in. How have you balanced the cultural differences between the we mentality of Indian society and the I-oriented culture of the UK? And what does it mean to be brown and British? So there's two questions there.
Perfect. Thank you, Meenakshi. I'll try to answer both of them. So just for a bit of context for the listeners. So I immigrated from India to the UK about a decade or so ago, having worked in India for a decade. And I moved in my early 30s as an expatriate with a global organization. So I had all the support and cushioning, and I was just not moving on my own. And I think what we don't talk about often enough, and with what we don't talk about at all, is how hard immigration is and how significant the cultural change one goes through once you move from east to west. And the resources that are available for support are almost negligent, because you're boom into the new culture and you're boom in the big job that you had signed up for. Right. So I think being brown and British for me is a complex journey. And for me, it's been a journey of learning and unlearning, or rather unlearning and learning, unlearning some brown things, learning some British things, and so on and so forth. And it's also been a complex journey with its own highs and lows, right? So let me talk a little bit about the highs, and I will definitely touch upon the lows and how they've shaped me into who I am today. So I think there's definitely the exposure that you get moving to a big city like London and a country like UK, and getting to work with people from different parts of the world. I think you add in a number of significant life skills, you learn change management, and you grow professionally and personally, right? So that's been beautiful, and UK is a beautiful country from a nature perspective as well. I've had the chance to travel, it's been wonderful. If I were to look at the things that have been obstacles in the way of assimilating and integrating, they start with small things like, I don't have a British accent, I've spent 30 years in India, right? That's the first barrier to fitting in. Then what I've often experienced with the UK job market is that we tend to overlook the experience that a person brings from before they entered the UK. And I've heard that from people who work across a number of functions. It's almost like the person starts afresh. And I think, I haven't reported to any CHRO, any chief HR officer in the last 10 years. And I speak as an HR professional who looks like me, and, pointing to what Ravina was saying. And I think that's been a huge inspiration for me working as an HR professional in the UK to say, I want to be the face for people who look like me, right? So those are some of the learning experiences, I would say, in this journey. And I think one that's very close to my heart, and I've probably never spoken about it on a public platform, is, words like bullying, gaslighting, workplace mobbing are words that have entered the dictionary of my lived experience only once I've worked in the UK. And it's taken me some time to unpack these, to heal these. So I think for me, being Meenakshi, you were asking the balance between the we and I. It's about learning to lean on the brown values of we, but also slowly discerning that I have to have my own back and stand in my corner and dial up my I. And I think that's really shaped me. And that's a big part of my purpose, as I work forward in my journey.
I really like the piece around the leaning in to the we. I love that. And I think, our identities are very complex, right? Our journeys are very, very complex. And so perhaps the complexity shapes us. And I want to come over to Ravina here. Ravina, look, you and I have known each other for a number of years, and we've had very, very intimate conversations about who we are, what shapes us. Having experienced those nuanced, blend of traditional Indian views and British culture, how have you navigated the cultural changes and integration for you, into the British culture, locally within your community? But how are you also celebrating being brown and British? Because whilst there are challenges, we've also got a lot to celebrate as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it's such a journey, right? So first of all, to kind of just mention, so I was born here in the UK, but so were my parents, but then my grandparents weren't. And I think what that has meant, my grandparents were all born in Punjab in India. And I think what that has meant is that the way that my grandparents were brought up is completely different to the way that they raised my parents. The way my parents were brought up is completely different to the way that they had to raise me and my brother. And that's led to these challenges where my parents are navigating conversations and nuances and parenting me on things that they had no idea what they were. They were literally like, how do I navigate this? Because what is it? This isn't something that I ever had or went through. So everyone in my family before me had had an arranged marriage. Perfectly normal, reasonable approach to things, but just not something that I've ended up doing. And my parents were like navigating me through dating when they were like, we don't know dating. I met your dad once. He was fine. And, that's how they've lived. So there's so many different nuances involved in that. And I think for me, the real key is leveraging the individuality. So I think it's about coming to terms with your own uniqueness, because I think there was a point where for me growing up, and I imagine other people have felt the same, irrelevant of where you grow up, it's sort of a growing up, coming of age feeling where you don't like being different. No one ever wants to stand out. When you're a teenager, the more you can be the same as everyone else, the better. And that's not always possible when you are brown and British. So that's always a challenge. But getting to a certain point where you're able to feel good about who you are, because every single one of us on this panel is brown and British, and we are all so different. So leveraging that uniqueness, that individuality, and then also just being comfortable in your own skin, because I found for me personally that I am so much of a better advocate for my fellow brown and British friends, colleagues, anybody that I know. I'm a much better role model to people who are coming up into kind of their working life. And I'm just a better person and a better advocate now that I feel as though I am comfortable in my own skin and I'm able to leverage that individuality. And I think that's how you can really navigate being brown and British, is really leaning into all the aspects that make you who you are. So I feel like that answers your question.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And we are all unique human beings, aren't we? And we talk about the color of our skin being brown. And I recently saw a quote somewhere saying that the color of our skin is just our wrap. What's inside us, what's within that wrap, that really, really matters. And family and community are important to us, right? You know, it's pivotal to the South Asian community, family and community. And that kind of brings me to the question that I want to come over to Shaheen. Um, Shaheen, for you, connection with family, community, and culture plays a huge healing part of, self and, sense and self. As one of 5 daughters who pursued sports despite being the only brown girl on the team, what challenges did you face?
Thanks, Meenakshi. So, yeah, you're taking me back some years now. So many years ago, I did, and I still do, take part in sport or physical activity. And one of the things that was really very helpful for me in my early stages was the fact that my father was very supportive. He was never discouraging that many years ago of me playing sport. And that's probably because he had a sporting background himself. So that was really quite easy for me in terms of blessing from home. But then taking that out onto the pitch or the court or whatever it was, it became a different story. So yeah, I faced racism, I faced aggression when I was a young person playing sport. And that didn't change as I wanted to do things that typically probably weren't what the regular communities were doing at that time. I was, life's journey is full of twists and turns. I was one of the first women in my extended family, to seek out a divorce. I was one of the first to bring up a son on my own. So again, typically these things could be seen as taboo in our societies and in our cultures. But I suppose what helped me through this and riding the waves of culture was that actually I was able to seek out and build relationships with people that either understood me or wanted to understand me, or were just very supportive. And as I actually was preparing for this, I was thinking, blimey, was this early stages of allyship? It's a term we use quite a lot today, but actually people that may or may not get you fully, but actually are there standing with you and helping you do the things that you wanted to do. So, I think I ended up building my own community. And I think that really has helped me. And I mean community made up of all sorts, right? It doesn't mean just seeking out people in the Southeast Asian community. It means seeking out people that are going to be supportive of me and stand by me. And I think that's been really, really important to help you deal with the challenges that do come along your way. And I think ultimately, when I look back at my time, I just wanted to be me. That was it. It wasn't about challenging the status quo, and it wasn't about challenging family or community. It was just, can I just be who I want to be, please? And I found, players to support me. So I built my own community. I would extend that, it's a team. It's a team of people. It doesn't have to be a humongous sized team, but it's really those that, you can lean on when you are juggling, because it is a juggling act. When you are switching codes, because we do switch codes, even though over time one becomes more and more comfortable, to Ravina's point, around who you are and your uniquenesses. And I think you do become more comfortable, as I have done. And so you share more of yourself. And so you do less code switching, but nevertheless, I don't think it's a done deal yet. And I think that's the way how I've dealt with my challenges, is having the right people around me. And continue to ride the waves.
And if I can just come back to you on that, you say the right people, but actually when we spoke last time, you used something really, really interesting, which intrigued me, is that you have a chosen family and a chosen community. Could you tell us a little bit more about your chosen family and your chosen community?
I think, exactly. The chosen community and family is really, made up of those individuals that actually are there for you and with you. And they have their own challenges that they've dealt with that you learn from, and it's supportive. But one has had to go out and choose people, which sometimes mean letting go of others. And that path changes over time, right? So that chosen community that you might have started off in your 30s may not still be with you in your 40s and your 50s. And I think that's all absolutely fine. But choosing people that actually lift you is, I think what I was talking about when I was talking about chosen individuals. Because it's tough as it is. So you want people around you that give you positive energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Choose wisely. Think about people around you and really choose wisely.
Anybody have any thoughts on chosen family and community here?
I can say that immigrants like me literally survive on that because, our family by blood is back, in the country we came from, in my case, India, and you get to meet them probably max twice a year. So for us, life in the UK is all about chosen family, which comes from friends, community, workplace, etc., etc. And it's always an endeavor to grow it. Right. And you learn sometimes to make the right choices by making the wrong ones.
Yeah, and you choose to pick your own family, your friends, your colleagues, and as we do that, we learn to celebrate ourselves as well, because we're surrounded by the people that we want to be surrounded by, and so that there is so much to celebrate about being South Asian. So Fahim, I want to come to you, because we've spoken a lot about some of the challenges, but there also is a lot to celebrate about the South Asian community. What are the pros and cons that you've experienced? Let's talk about the pros. Being South Asian, brown skin, we've got so much heritage and culture to celebrate and talk about. Could you share some of your stories?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So just a bit of context on me before we begin. So I'm originally Pakistani, born in Saudi Arabia, lived there till I was 7, moved to Pakistan from 7 to 11, then moved to Canada, where I grew up essentially from 11 to 24, and then moved to the UK about 18 years ago. So I've had the privilege really to live in lots of different countries. And the country that I'm actually from, Pakistan, I've lived there the least amount of time. So certainly know what it feels like being brown in lots of different environments and different communities. I'm also a gay man who's neurodiverse. And so certainly there were additional challenges coming from a Muslim Pakistani household around LGBT and also around neurodiversity and the stigma that's around that. So, but we're talking about pros right now, so we'll come back to that. What are the pros of being South Asian? I think, one of our greatest strengths is this sense of community and sense of family, and other colleagues have referenced it already. And when we say family in the South Asian context, it isn't just your mom, your dad, your siblings, or your cousins. It's actually your cousins, your cousins' cousins, your uncles, aunts, nieces, nephew. There is this real strong sense of community that you can really rely on for lots of support and positivity in lots of different ways. And I think that's a real pro of being South Asian, because you're brought into this world and immediately you have this tribe, which can be tens, hundreds of people that you are somehow connected to, your network that will help you both personally, professionally when you get older, and all of that, which is really, really good. I think the other great thing about being South Asian is how our parents are really ambitious for us, right? So as I said earlier, I'm a teacher, and actually South Asian children in the UK are the second highest performing after students from the Orient. So that is, again, something really positive, because our parents embed in us from a young age this sense of importance for education, and really support us, lots of tutoring if they're able to, but also these really high expectations. And as a teacher, when we analyze different subgroups of students, not all students come from backgrounds where education is valued in that way. And that has real detrimental effects in terms of their long-term prosperity and other things. So I think the focus on education, the focus on values, the focus on high expectations, and this network are real positives about being South Asian. It's certainly something that I have benefited from. Meenakshi, to answer the other side of your question, the darker side, the cons, it's interesting because I think in some ways it's a double-edged sword, like so many things. It's the same things that are really pros of being in the South Asian community that also act as cons. So if I give you some examples, for instance, yes, we have this tribe, this kind of community around us, but when you try to go against the accepted norms and folkways of that community, you don't just have your parents to essentially battle with. You have this extended family that you're now battling with to be your true authentic self. So in my case, that meant being LGBT. So coming out as gay, it wasn't just about coming out to my parents. It was about, okay, what would the aunties think? What would the cousins think? What does it mean for all of that? So although it can be a real benefit, it can also act as a real limiting force if you are looking to go against the grain. Also, I think as a community, the South Asian community perhaps hasn't progressed as quickly around some of the evolutions around values that some of the other kind of ethnic groups have. So, for instance, our views on women's rights, for instance, our views on LGBT, for instance. And, I'm stereotyping here, but I think as a community, we still have some work to do around supporting women going into the workplace and not expecting women to leave their job just because they have children, and expecting men to carry their fair share of workload in the home and play an active role in that. And particularly around LGBT, trans rights, I think there's work for South Asian communities to do there to catch up with some of our other communities. And I think part of the reason that is because we live in these, again, one of the strengths of South Asian families is we live in these multi-generational households often. So it wouldn't be unusual for a student that I teach to live with their parents and their grandparents all in one household. And I can see my panel members nodding along. And that's great, right? Because you've got this amazing childcare, and you're being these family values are being embedded in you, and all of that is great. But also it means that when you do want to go to university as a young student that's away from home, and that's something your grandparents aren't happy with, even if your parents are, that's still a challenge that you'll face, because actually your parents aren't your only parent. Your grandparents are playing a very active and very vocal role in your upbringing, and they're from a different generation, right? Times two. So I think all of those reasons can be a great strength to our community, but they can also be barriers that particularly young people, particularly women, particularly LGBT people, particularly people coming from minority groups within our South Asian community have to face as barriers.
Yeah, I mean, the South Asian community have faced many, many barriers, over the decades and decades and decades of being, living here in Britain. And I suppose I feel that the perception out there within Britain is that, the South Asian community are fine. They're getting on with things, right? They've settled in, they are okay. But sometimes I do feel that we are the forgotten community. And I don't know if anybody wants to come in here and comment, but I personally feel that we are the forgotten community. And I think what we need to do is elevate our voices, create these spaces such as this, like today, to share our stories, to tell our stories, and navigate where we need to be going in the future.
I think South Asian, sorry, I'm just going to chip in here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that the term South Asian in itself is actually incredibly broad. Like there's so many people encaptured within that. And although when you think about it, for example, as Bean just said around school like grades, South Asian people really excel and they do well in that sense. We're also amongst, I think it's specifically Bangladeshi and Pakistani families are amongst the least employed, like the highest rate of unemployment within the UK. Also the highest rates of like larger numbers of people living under one house, like the largest rates of sort of poverty within any kind of group. So there's all these nuances to be involved, and then that's not even, you know, taking into account intersectionality, because once you get started on that, we've got the fact that women who are from South Asian communities have a massive role to play in terms of the unpaid labour force. So a lot of the home working, the work at home, not the home working, we all do that now, done by South Asian women, the sandwich carers, so people who are both looking after children and perhaps parents or more elderly relatives. Predominantly, a lot of those are South Asian women, if not more broadly, kind of women of colour in general. So I think when looking at that South Asian piece, like you said, Meenakshi, I just think sometimes we forget there's so many nuances and identities within that are just, like, the experience is not linear in any way, shape or form. There's just so many variations, and I think that can often be forgotten.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do believe that there is this element of we need to deconstruct, you know, our communities, because, you know, Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Bangladeshis, Pakistan, you know, we are all different, right? We are, you know, language divides us, you know, our faith, our religion, you know, and the ways of doing things at home. There's just so many things that kind of divide us. What I'm interested in today is also, you know, how are communities of belonging being grown in our little pockets? You know, we've all got our little communities here. Deborah, I just want to come to you. As we deconstruct and reconstruct our lives and contributions within our community, how are you growing your community? I mean, you've lived around the world. You've traveled and you've worked and you've lived around the world. That in itself would have brought challenges. So how are you growing your community of belonging, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah, thank you. And before that, just to add to the previous conversation that you just added, I think it all starts with a very important thing, which is with our mindset and our willingness. So to the same thing around, okay, why do we feel our voices are not there? So I like what Ravina just mentioned, but to add to that, there is, I think, another thing. It's sometimes parts of those communities, it's either about the confidence or the competence, right? Because sometimes there are people who have lots to say, but I think they just lack the confidence, so they don't take the step forward, or they don't have the competence, not knowing how do I narrate this story or the urgency. So therefore, either of those or the lack of it doesn't work. Right. So that's why I love the topic. I really love everybody's story. And I think I'm able to connect to what I'm going to share about belongingness. Because the way I see communities is that it can be our healthy social capital, and we must invest very wisely in building a great community. And also, there is no need that we have to be a part of one community. We can be a part of many communities, right? But we need to understand this sense of belonging, because that can be so complex sometimes, where everybody gives their own interpretation to it, and it can get more and more confusing rather than cohesive. So that's what I'm going to try and kind of create in what I'm going to say, because I feel a community thrives on an authentic sense of belongingness, and that is generated by an amazing blend of science and arts, right? And to also set that community up for success, we must start with a very strong why first, which is basically the purpose and the big goal of the community or each community, to know what is that we want to achieve for each other and for the community as a whole. So with that, then, if I talk about the science aspect, which includes basically all the what's, so these are kind of the must-haves, right? And which are shared values, progressive dialogues, self-accountability, and collective outcomes. And some of it I've just heard from my, the fellow panelists today, right? So whether it is Anchal and Ravina, who has mentioned about how important it is to share that visibility, that if we have had the privileges in our life, whether we were born here or we immigrated here, it's our stories. We need to have a platform to share it. So I'm so proud to hear them share theirs, right? Because that makes many more who will be listening to say that, hey, I can connect to this. part of the values. Then it's about Fahim's story about values and how those values can make or break sometimes. It's not one-sided. It's like the two sides of the same coin. So, but how do we create that shared understanding with those values? Then it's about having those progressive dialogues, which again Fahim addressed about, like, how do you open up those? How do you create safety to say, yeah, it's okay, we may have difference in opinion, but we can still maintain a dialogue, because the opinion is only an opinion, but we are two human beings coming from two directions. So let's look at the opinion and not each other or against each other. And then the collective outcome, which is where I love what Shaheen brought forward about the chosen family, right? Because it should be common sense, but sometimes it's not very common. But we sometimes get conditioned that we have to be part of something, even if we are not happy being part of it, right? So that's why I love that word, what Shaheen very nicely shared and put forward, the chosen family and the chosen friends or the chosen community, because it's about you. It's about you want to be a part of a community that flourishes, that celebrates you. Why would we want to be a part of a community to be sabotaged, right? Because I think a lot of us grow up with so much of self-sabotaging mindset that it is sad to see that how that impacts our rest of our lives. So I feel being a part or having that opportunity to optimize from a chosen family, I think is a fantastic idea, right? So these are the ingredients of all the what's. Then comes the art, because the art aspect is about the how. So this is where it's how, what are the approach that we use of doing things well, which is through compassion, trust, and safety. And that's really key as well, because if you think about this in a metaphor, so I want to use the metaphor of wanting to paint a beautiful painting. So to paint that, all the ingredients we need is probably the paints, the brushes, the canvas, right? But then the art comes to life as we contribute our most authentic thoughts and feelings to the action of wanting to paint that painting, right? And therefore, if building a great community is an investment, as it will become our healthy social capital, then it will demand something beyond our knowledge and skills to achieve that. And that is our willingness, our courage, and our commitment to practice and foster this sense of belonging for not only for ourselves, but also for others. Because after all, an important reason why people seek out a community is when we desire to fulfill the unmet human needs out there in the wider world, and it provides us with the place within that world that we feel safe to be a part of, to build our own strengths first, so that we can contribute positively with our collective strength to kind of rebuild, reimagine a more unified world. So that's how I feel belonging has so much to kind of give as much as we can gain from it through all our individual stories.
Oh my God, Debraj, I think belonging has just gone to another level. Science and art. I love the way that you have just broken that down, where it gives us the choices, where we feel connected, where we have values. I'm just looking at belonging in a completely different way now. Thank you for sharing that. I've got a comment that has come in from Sejal Gupta. Ravina, it's saying, Ravina, I loved your phrase, you cannot be what you can't see. I get told the opposite from non-South Asians. If you can't see it, just be it.
Well, I mean, that's just a lovely idea, isn't it? And definitely something we should all try our best to do, because, sky's the limit. But at the same time, I think that comes from a place of, idealism where, of course, everybody would love to achieve things without the need for role models. But we know through actual scientific research that it's incredibly difficult to see yourself in a position when there aren't already people there. It's that snowball effect, right? Like once it's done. I mean, there's a great statistic, and I'm absolutely going to butcher it. So if somebody could look and correct me, because I've it's terrible. But it's the mile, a sub 4 minute mile. Nobody ran it until somebody ran it. And once they ran it, a further 20 people ran it the next year. It's something like that. So people are nodding. It's clearly, that's the gist, but look it up
Yeah.
and then you can tell other people, because it is a cracking statistic if you know the exact numbers. But basically what that is saying is that when people didn't think it was possible, they weren't even trying it. Once they knew it was possible, look how many people did it straight away after. You almost need someone to show you it can be done. And this would have been really, really impactful if I knew the exact numbers. But you get what you see what I'm getting at. And I think
You get the gist.
you get my vibe. You're picking up
Yeah.
what I'm putting down. And I think having that idea that somebody's done it makes you think, oh, that could be me. I could do it. So I think if anybody says that to you, was it Sejal? You need to look up this 4 minute mile stat and tell them that and say, I'll try my best. But once I do it, watch how many people follow.
Well, I'm going to look that one up because it's the first time I'm hearing about that. Sejal, I hope that has inspired you. Right. So I think we've all had our journeys. We've all experienced different things in different ways. And I suppose we all kind of think about or reflect, if we could just turn back the clock and just do something differently, that one thing differently, what's the one thing that you may do differently? And what's that one piece of advice that you would give to yourself? Anyone?
I can go if you like. So
Yeah, sure.
I think the most important piece of advice I would give young people is you can build your own tribe, right? You don't have to fit into the culture from which you come. For me, it was about if I do come out as gay, how will my aunties ever accept that? How will I ever fit into that mold? But I wish someone had told me, you don't have to fit into that mold. You don't have to fit into that mold. Go and find your own tribe, your own people, your own community that accept that and are molded around you. So the advice I would give is don't mold yourself around what exists already. Mold your community around who you want to be.
I like that.
I'll go next. Shaheen will follow Fahim. I think I would say to myself, look, just keep going. It's okay to be different and think differently. It's okay. But just don't be too tough on yourself when you're on that journey. Go easy on yourself.
Thank you, Shaheen.
I think
could go
mine.
next. Oh, sorry, go on.
No,
go on.
I was just going to say mine sort of piggybacks quite nicely, and it's in a similar sort of vein where there's a Carl Jung quote that says the privilege of a lifetime is to be who you truly are, and I just think that's phenomenal, because my advice would be don't try and make yourself smaller because you think that's going to make you more palatable to other people. Just try and embrace who you are from whatever age you feel ready to do that, because the quicker you get there, you'll definitely be saving a lot of energy that you were trying to change that.
So continuing on that, I would tell my younger self that, navigating through places, cultures, communities may seem tough. Remember that you don't need fixing or fitting in to please others. So all you need to be is to be your authentic self, have compassion for yourself and for others, to lead a life with courage and commitment for your own and for your own happiness. That's what I'll tell myself.
Super. I'll go the last, and I think what I'm going to say is probably just a different way of what everybody else has said. I think I'll tell my younger self to trust its gut instincts more. I think as a society, not just South Asian, but in general, we are just conditioned to use rational logic in every decision making. But sometimes our gut tells us if a situation is not right for us, if a career decision is not right for us. And we often tend to ignore that gut feeling for what the left brain says or what other people say. So it's kind of embrace your inner knowledge because it knows best. And it'll guide you to the places that you need to be.
I like that, Angel. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We've got many corporates that have joined us today, listening into, our history, our stories, our challenges, our, what as a South Asian community, what we celebrate. What would be your one kind of challenge or action or a thought that you would like to communicate to the corporate world?
I think for me, it's about understanding the unique challenges that South Asian people face. So, some examples of that, there might be a disproportionate expectation on South Asian women who are in the workforce because actually they might have to go home and perhaps carry the majority of the workload at home as well, which means taking care of the children, the cooking, the cleaning, etc. So maybe they're not able to work late into the evening. Maybe they're not as accessible after working hours, and that shouldn't count against them. And I think also on the other end of the journey, the corporate journey, when young people from South Asian backgrounds join your organization, sometimes the qualities that are valued in particularly competitive corporate environments aren't qualities that we've been embedding in those South Asian young people. I'll give you an example. So being confident and being outspoken and being quite aggressive is not the right word, but being proactive, that's the right word. Being proactive is really valued in the corporate environment, but actually in South Asian cultures, we embed in young, particularly children, you should be respectful, you should be quiet, you should not be looking your elders in the eyes directly. So don't write off those young professionals coming in, even if they seem a bit shy, even if they seem a bit withdrawn. Just create a really safe environment for them where they can flourish and grow, because there's a huge amount of potential in those young people. It's just about understanding the unique challenges that they face, and the code switching that they do, and supporting them on their journey.
And that code switching is really important because they have this one identity when they are at home for him, as a carer, as a giver, as a, you're having to abide by your cultural kind of norms, and then you're having to fit into the corporate world. That is a huge undertaking for our young people to have that dual identity.
Yeah, and I think it's even more so for young women. I think we really need to be mindful of that. And I think last thing from me, in the South Asian culture, a lot more of the young professionals are still living at home. Even in their late 20s, they're still living at home. They're still having to do that code switching. They're still trying to balance the responsibilities that are placed on them at home as carers or others or other aspects, and also their professional world. So, Meenakshi, you said earlier, sometimes you feel the South Asian community is the forgotten community. And I think this is where that really comes alive. Have we, from a cultural intelligence perspective lens, have we really analyzed as education organizations, as corporate organizations, what are the unique challenges that South Asian people face as they go through these transitions? And I think we haven't done enough of that. So I would encourage our corporate partners on the call to really think about that, set up ERGs. And I know Equality Leaders does a lot of good work around that. Create safe spaces, create channels where your new colleagues can share how they're feeling, where those pain points are, and how as an organization you can help them with that transition.
Thank you, Fahim. Thank you for that. Same question to the rest of the floor.
Can I go next? So I think I really like what Fahim just said, is we can't have a quick fix to a lifelong concern, right? So that's why I think I want to kind of just progress that to say, yes, we need that. And I really love that Fahim mentioned about cultural intelligence, because with the 4 pillars of cultural intelligence, somehow the first 2 are more doable. The challenge starts appearing when it starts the last 2, which is the strategy and the action, because that's when a lot of things starts falling into pieces, because you're now questioning a collective intelligence rather than an individual intelligence, right? And I think that's where the only way we can do this, if it is a lifelong concern, then it has to come through lifelong learning. right? So we can't just kind of say, okay, I've learned something and that's the job done. It's not that easy. It has to be a lifelong learning. So that's what I would like to challenge the people listening today to say, how can you do this in your corporate world? Is to establish that ecosystem where you set something which is as an expectation that people will and should learn throughout their life. So that's why I love what I do, is because I don't just talk about leadership, because sometimes leadership can be thought as a title, but I talk about self leadership. We are all leaders in our own way, right? And when we have that kind of a mindset, then when we have the attitude of lifelong learning, when we know better, then we can go out and we can keep doing better. We don't have to be embarrassed. We don't have to be ashamed that I got something wrong. We can learn from our failures and mistake, and we can then say, okay, now I know how not to do something and to fall apart. I now know how to do something differently. So I think that is how we can generate that more and more positive impact for ourselves, for others, and we can foster that equity and inclusion for everyone. So it's that story about constantly knowing how to adapt. That code switching that we spoke about. It's about what resources do different people need that they can constantly adapt better in a healthy way.
If I could go next and just sort of say, bring a couple of points together, which I think is around seeing people like yourself. If I'm thinking about the corporate environment, if I think about, in all my time, how many women have I seen in senior positions that look like me? I could probably count that on less than 5 fingers, right, in my time. That plus, I think, the piece around understanding and meeting people from the different communities. I would really encourage, organizations to go and speak to their people. Go and find out, rather than kind of a wide theory around what different people from different communities are like. Go and talk to the individuals in your organization, listen to their stories beyond what they eat and what they wear. Go beyond that and start listening to some of the ways we've been nurtured as individuals as we've been growing up, some of the community context, and then also think about how that can play into whether you're recruiting at graduate level or anyway up the spectrum, and what needs to be put into place or understandings that need to be had when you're bringing in all sorts of diversity into the organisation. We're talking about South Asian people here today, so hence why that lens here. But I think that's the critical piece. Get to understand your people, get to meet them and understand them.
Thank you, Shaheen, for that. And I've just got a comment that's coming from Karishma Motiram. Love that, Shaheen. I think South Asians tend to put a lot of pressure on themselves due to cultural expectations, when we don't need to add to that to ourselves anymore. We don't need to add to it ourselves. So thank you, Karishma, for that. Anchal, Ravina, who would like to go next?
I can go next. I was trying to think of something to add on to what Debraj and Shaheen shared. So I would say increase representation in the people function of South Asians. And it's a very focused advice. And I think it's probably coming from my own lived experiences, because the people function or the HR function in most corporates carries the baton of sort of leading the bandwagon on inclusion and diversity and bringing in more diverse representation, be it ethnicity or be it any other demographics. And what I've often seen in my own experience is that function carries the worst representation of ethnic minorities and diversities. So it's almost like the change starts there. And I think that will truly help catalyze some of the education and the learning and the lifelong learning that other panel members kind of talked about, right? That's one. And the other thing that I would say, which is sort of perhaps a very nuanced observation I've made over the years, is that look beyond face value. So, and I think that's true for a lot of communities. So South Asians and Asians tend to look much younger than they are. And I can see a lot of people smiling on the panel. And sometimes, we get taken at face value, be it job interviews even if you have seat on the table, sometimes the fact that you look very young can work against you in a community that tends to look much more mature and older than they actually are, right? And therefore, I think this is something that can be solved through training and through education and guidance, to say, look beyond face value and sort of give people a chance. And I think the last I would say is for South Asian leaders to support South Asians. We all discuss there are very few people who look like us, but are those people who look like us really supporting and sponsoring and nurturing the talent that looks like them? Or are they enjoying their position of, growth or power and literally stepping on other people who look like them? And I think I'm not sure. And I've had varied experiences in that area as well. So those will be a couple of things that sort of come top of my head.
And I think as we climb the ladder, we need to ensure that we leave the ladder there for others to climb as well. Right. And I think that's really, really important. And I think just going back to very quickly, Fahim and Debraj, you both mentioned cultural intelligence. And I fundamentally believe that, the work that we are all doing in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion, cultural intelligence is that glue that brings all of that work that we do together. And for those that haven't heard of cultural intelligence, it is that capability to work more effectively in intercultural situations. And so if you want to know any more about CQ, please do reach out to us. Ravina.
Thanks. So I think mine's going to be quite short and sweet, but in a similar thread to what's been said, that piece on, if you break a glass ceiling, don't take the ladder with you. It's important to make sure that you're supporting people who come after you, and you're being as a role model, and other people who are South Asian. But on the flip side of that, I also think that we all have a responsibility for taking someone with us on the journey. And I think, especially when looking at the corporate world, it's not that this is an issue for people who are from those historically excluded groups to fix. This is a problem that we all need to work together to fix. And I really think we need to make sure that we're being conscious that this isn't this is kind of a worldwide issue. This isn't something that we need to rely on those minority leaders, those few handful of people who are in those senior positions. They can help for sure, and those role models, as I've said, are integral. But I just think everyone needs to remember that we all have a part to play in this, and that can be as small as if you go to a webinar and you have a colleague sat next to you who isn't going, you say, "Oh, I think it would be really good. Let's go together." And it can be as small as that. Take someone with you on the journey. So yeah, that's my takeaway.
Thank you. And I want to thank you all for giving us 60 minutes of your very valuable time. It's been an absolute wonder to have listened to your stories, understood your lived experiences, and I've learned a lot more today. So thank you. And I just want to kind of end with a little thought from me. Like, I feel like no matter what your story is, our stories are, deserve, they are deserved to be told. Every experience, every moment that we have, every journey holds that unique value and has a meaning. So whenever you do get an opportunity, whether it's like, when you're walking down to the coffee shop with your colleagues, or whether it's a water cooler moment, share your stories, share your narratives, because it does inspire, it comforts us, and it connects all of us as well. So I hope today has brought a little bit more light to the stories of the South Asian community, for those that are listening in today. And it's been an absolute honor to have hosted our very first South Asian Voices Amplified session. And I hope we can do a lot more and, craft more spaces for the South Asian community to not only tell our stories, but actually build the future generation of leaders as well from this space. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Meenakshi, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Shaheen.
Yeah, thank you, Meenakshi, for creating a platform for us to explore South Asian voices, because as you said, it isn't being done enough. So we're grateful to have champions like you.
And hopefully this becomes the first 4-minute mile.
Yes.
Can we create this into a 4-minute mile?
I think we should, yeah, thank
Not
you.
quite sure what that would look like, but we could do something.
This is the the webinar equivalent of the 4-minute mile. That's what we've decided. But thank you, Meenakshi. Thank you to my fellow panelists, but also thank you to everybody who's taken an hour out of their day to listen.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
panelists.
Really enjoyed
Thank
the
you,
discussion.
listeners too.